The Saiyan race is doomed. Bardock, a low-class warrior, is cursed with the knowledge of the future. He witnesses before his eyes the erasure of his home world at the hands of the tyrant known as Frieza. He tries desperately to make sense of his visions, wondering to himself if he is capable of changing his fate and the fate of his people. However, this isn't the only tragedy he sees. Mixed within his vision, he witnesses something that will change the course of history forever. With his squad by his side, will Bardock be capable of defying fate itself? Find out now. Twin Destinies. What if Bardock's squad Our story begins on a far-off planet, in the vastness of space, in a universe vastly different from our own. There was a tyrannical space emperor known as Frieza, who commanded a massive army of unparalleled power and scale. With his forces, Frieza would conquer entire worlds and wipe out the native inhabitants in order to sell the planets to the highest bidder. No planet was capable of withstanding his overwhelming might. Mixed among this army was an entire race of warriors known as the Saiyans. Their prowess in combat was legendary, unmatched by most alien races in the known universe. Frieza was pleased with their performance in conquest, but soon he started to become concerned. The Saiyans were getting stronger, too strong. And their local legends about a supposed Super Saiyan was even more concerning. He needed to get rid of this problem before it could ever become a problem. He would have to resort to the one tactic that always worked for him before: genocide. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the universe, there was a planet that was currently being invaded by the Saiyans. Their names were Tora, Fasha, Shugesh, and Borgos. Led by the low-class warrior known as Bardock, this squad of conquerors eradicated the entire Canassan race in a single night. They were cold and merciless, razing the planet to the ground and leaving no survivors, as they had done many times before. But did they? On the following day, they were attacked by one lone surviving Canassan. He struck Bardock, implanting him with the ancient Canassan ability of foresight. On the moment of impact, Bardock's eyes widened as he witnessed multiple flashes in his mind. He first sees the destruction of planet Vegeta at the hands of Lord Frieza. He sees a small, blue and green planet saved by a Saiyan that looks very similar to himself. And then, he sees something strange. He sees the image of a massive statue holding a torch over an island, and at the bottom of the island is a flag, one adorned with stars and blue, red, and white stripes. What did this mean?
Now, you're cursed to see the future, to see the horror of your end, just like we had to. You'll be powerless to stop destiny.
The lone survivor is quickly dispatched, the Canassan race fully wiped out. The rest of the squad merely wrote off his threats as the ravings of a madman. Yet, Bardock wasn't sure. He saw many strange things in that moment. He experienced things he couldn't explain. Did he actually see the future? As time passed and Bardock returned to his home base, the Saiyan was bombarded with even more intense, strange visions. He witnesses the destruction of his home world once again by a massive sphere of death, followed by a gruesome sight: his squad mates murdered and sprawled across the floor at the hands of one of Frieza's strongest soldiers, Dodoria.
No! That can't be! This is impossible!
Bardock!
Hey, Bardock! Wake up!
Bardock is suddenly awoken by none other than Tora, the same comrade he had seen moments before. bleeding out and inches from death, now smiling with his usual vigor. Tora had come to say goodbye to Bardock, as he and the rest of the squad would be heading to their next assignment, Planet Meat. At any other time, Bardock would have merely shrugged and let them be, but after seeing such a brutal vision of their passing, he decides to make the last-minute decision to accompany his squad. Tora is taken aback at first. Didn't he want to see his newborn Kakarot before he's assigned to his first mission? Why should I care about a low-level brat with no future? Come on, Tora. We got a job to do. Without any hesitation, Bardock abandons his son as he heads off to Planet Meat. The squad barely struggles against the native populace, eradicating them with little effort. Unfortunately for them, their lives are put in jeopardy by the sudden arrival of a group of elite Frieza Force soldiers. And Dodoria. Bardock breaks out into a cold sweat as Tora asks why Dodoria and his men were here. They hadn't called in for any backup from the Frieza Force. Dodoria starts to chuckle as flashes of his comrade's death resonate across Bardock's mind. This was it. This was the moment. If he didn't do something now, his squad was going to perish. As Dodoria announces Lord Frieza's new extermination orders and his intent to eradicate their little club, Bardock catches the soldiers off guard as he fires multiple ki blasts in rapid succession. He blasts away the scouters off their faces before firing a massive ki ball to the ground that surrounds the entire war zone in dust and debris. Bardock then orders his squad to retreat. Shugesh tries to argue back, but he shouts once more for them to escape. That was an order! Dodoria was far too strong for them. His power level was over 20,000. They didn't stand a chance! Without any more hesitation, the Bardock squad dashes away as Dodoria orders his men to find that scum. Thankfully, Dodoria and his men no longer had scouters. They were now unable to track down the Saiyan's power signature, while the squad still could with their scouters. Fasha, Shugesh, Tora, and Borgos thanked Bardock for his quick thinking. If it wasn't for him, they would surely be dead. Bardock thanks his companions, revealing to them he had foreseen their deaths in a vision granted to him by the last Knesset. At first, they thought he was joking, but then they realized he was dead serious. Tora believed in his commander. How else could he have been so prepared against Dodoria's sudden betrayal? With their belief in their leader reaffirmed, the squad resolves to follow Bardock with whatever decision he makes. After evading their pursuers throughout the decimated planet for what seemed like hours, Bardock devises a plan to slip through Dodoria's grasp and steal his spaceship. He had destroyed the Saiyan space pods and settled on protecting their last remaining ship. They had to sneak past him. Then, if they survived, the squad would return to planet Vegeta, their homeworld, and warn their people about Frieza's incoming attack. However, just as it seems they are about to escape, Dodoria spots the Saiyans. He rushes forward, slamming into Bardock with his spiked skull, nearly killing him. It takes a combined blast from the entire squad simply to push Dodoria back, giving Fasha enough time to kickstart the spaceship. The squad barely escapes with their lives, with Bardock hovering over the edge of death. As the spaceship flies across the stars, Bardock stirs in his sleep. He witnesses more bizarre, unsettling visions of things that may or may not come to pass. He sees Frieza, Zarbon, and Dodoria invading a planet with green aliens, followed by a wasteland where someone who looks to be King Vegeta is facing off against himself? No, that couldn't be him. It had to be another low-class Saiyan. Could it perhaps be his son, Kakarot? Then, The scene shifts as the two rock formations the Saiyans are standing on turn into a pair of massive steel towers, which, in an instant, explode and collapse around him. Bardock wakes up in a cold sweat once again as he realizes he was inside a spaceship, surrounded by his squad. The team was glad to see him up again. Fasha and Shugesh knew it'd take more than what Dodoria had to make him kick the bucket. Borgos responded with a simple smile. Bardock chuckles for a moment before returning to his usual stoic expression. He explains that he had been receiving more visions. They are becoming far more frequent and vivid than before. He couldn't even begin to explain what he saw in these visions, nor what they could mean. All he knew was that they were quickly running out of time. They needed to see King Vegeta and the rest of the Saiyans as soon as possible. Working together was their only chance at survival. The squad nods in agreement. They believe in Bardock's visions now. They saw Dodoria's treachery with their own eyes. They needed to stay together. Bardock himself believed that, with his squad surviving, this could mean that the Kanasan was wrong. It was indeed possible to defy destiny. Bardock and his squad make a vow to survive and change their fate. Together, they could change the future. Unfortunately, when they returned to planet Vegeta, things didn't go as planned. The king refused to grant an audience to a group of low-class Saiyans. At the bars, the squad was laughed off by the rest of the soldiers inside. Why would Frieza ever want to kill them all? The Saiyans comprise a majority of his army after all. No matter what they tried, none of the squad were able to convince anyone that Frieza was going to betray them, let alone banding together for an insurrection. Fasha was pissed, nearly starting a fight at one of the taverns, when suddenly, Bardock experienced his most vivid vision yet. He was standing in a green field, looking at the back of a man with a familiar style of spiky hair. Bardock reaches out, calling out for Kakarot, flower petals falling down gracefully. Yet, when the man turns around, he sees him shift into the ghastly visage of Frieza. Bardock gasps as Frieza shifts again, his body morphing, his face changing to that of a strange old man with an even stranger outfit. Bardock had no clue who this man was as he heard Frieza's laugh in the distance. Bardock looked up to see that he was now standing in the middle of a massive city, and high above the sky, rapidly descending into the ground, was an enormous missile. The explosive reaches ground zero, erupting in a massive blast that knocks Bardock away and incinerates everything else in its path. Bardock wakes up once more, shaken awake by Tora. He had followed him outside. As it turns out, he noticed Bardock stumble outside of the bar before he passed out. The rest of the squad emerged from the bar covered in scars. They had finished beating up most of the patrons that had mocked them. They asked Bardock if he was okay, as their captain turned to the sky, his eyes shaking erratically. They turned to face a horrible sight. The Frieza mothership was hovering overhead. They were too late. Bardock stood up, pushing Tora off as he tried to stand on his own 2 feet. He announced that they couldn't wait anymore. Frieza was here. It was time for their final stand. Tora, Fasha, Shugesh, and Borgo stand by their comrade as they grit their teeth, raising their ki. If they were going to die, then they'd die as they lived, by fighting to the very end. The squad burst their auras, launching themselves towards the mothership. A seemingly endless army of Frieza Force soldiers emerged to repel the invaders. Yet, no matter what they do, no matter how many times they blast at the Saiyans, Bardock's squad does not give up. Their resolve does not waver. Entire waves of soldiers are annihilated as the Saiyans down below look on in awe. Were a misfit crew of low-class trash really capable of standing up to Lord Frieza? Inside the mothership, Dodoria is mocked by Frieza's right-hand lieutenant, Zarbot, for being unable to do such a simple job as killing a handful of monkeys. If it wasn't for his generosity, Dodoria would have still been stranded on planet Meat. The two lieutenants continued to argue until their lord approached them from behind. No, this farce needed to end. The Saiyans needed to be eradicated in one fell swoop. As the Bardock squad inches ever closer to the mothership, they notice a hatch at the top suddenly open. Despite their heavy wounds, they couldn't mistake the sight of Frieza. The squad trembles in fear, but not Bardock. No, he chuckles, blood dripping down his face as he concentrates every ounce of energy in his body into a single point in his hand. This was it. This was his chance to overthrow destiny and carve a new path. If not for his race, then for himself and his squad. Now, everything changes. The fate of planet Vegeta, my own fate, my son's fate, my squad's fate. And yes, yours too, Frieza. This is where it ends. Bardock throws his final gambit, his strongest riot javelin, straight towards the Emperor. Frieza refuses to utter a single word, simply charging a small key ball on his finger, which quickly expands into an enormous supernova of unimaginable scale. Frieza casually flings the ball straight towards Bardock as it swallows the riot javelin, shooting straight towards planet Vegeta. Tora, Fasha, Shugesh, and Borgos attempt to fire their own ki blasts, but it's futile. This was the end, wasn't it? As Bardock attempted to repel the supernova with his bare hands, his squad mates attempted to do the same, joining their comrade, their leader, in his futile attempts to avert disaster. Bardock shouts at Tora to run away, to live and fight another day. But he refuses. If he's going out, then he's going with him. Fasha, Shugesh, and Borgos agree wholeheartedly through gritted teeth. Despite the pain, despite knowing they were going to die, they were glad that they were here. Saiyans were never meant to be more than killers. Fighting and slaying was all they had ever known. Yet, as members of Bardock's squad, they felt as if they had somewhere they could belong. It was almost as if they were friends. And that was something worth fighting for, despite all the odds. As Bardock and his squad struggled against the supernova, they were ultimately consumed by the blast alongside the rest of their planet. As Bardock felt his body be obliterated by the light, he had one final vision. He saw his son, Kakarot, as a man, once again on that alien planet and staring down against Frieza. Perhaps it wasn't Bardock's destiny to defeat Frieza. It must be Kakarot's fate after all. The same kid he wrote off as useless. He was gonna be the one to beat Frieza! Bardock smiles brightly. He could accept his death knowing that, one day, a Saiyan would slay the Emperor. But then, he sees one more vision. It was another, strange vision that made no sense to him. He saw Frieza and Kakarot disappear as two towers of steel appeared before him once again. He saw 4 aircraft shoot across the sky, followed by screaming, an eruption, and the destruction of the towers filling the air. He hears Frieza's mocking laugh once more as Bardock calls out the name of his son. Then, he hears nothing. It was over. Or was it? No, I'm not gonna explain myself. If you want to find out what happens,